doing? Welcome to the latest edition of APUSH on the Road. You're looking at a artist rendition and hearing a bus. An artist rendition of Washington crossing the Delaware. This is the famous Lutz painting from the 1850s, but it's become kind of the iconic symbol of the American Revolution. It is carved right outside the door of the Museum of the American Revolution. I'm here with Mr. Zagari.
What's up, folks?
We're here in Philadelphia, getting a look at this incredible museum. Hopefully when we get inside, we'll give you some even more interesting things to look at. On the flip side of the door, looks like the depiction of the signing of the Declaration. And here we go. Probably difficult with the shadows, but that's the signing of the Declaration. We're going to catch up inside. We'll see you guys in a bit. All right, guys, we're here in Philadelphia. You are looking at the first Bank of the United States. This was Hamilton's baby, or at least one of the first branches of the Bank of the United States. That's more accurate. This one was built in 1795, and it was one of a number of branches that was built at the time to manage the nation's finances. Don't forget, in 1795, New York City would have actually been the capital. But of course, Philly was a major city at the time, and having a branch of the bank made all sense. This was kind of the, the Americans' way of kind of establishing themselves as the equal of the European counterparts by not just having an institution like the bank, but having a structure like this with the classical architecture to really represent what they saw themselves as becoming, which is the equal of the Europeans. It's hard to see all the detail, obviously, with my camera phone, but we'll do a little bit more discussion on this one later as well. All right, guys, we're at the back side of Independence Hall. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this side of the building is because one of the interesting notes about, particularly when the Constitutional Convention was taking place, was that they didn't want people eavesdropping on the conversations. So you can imagine that not only were the windows closed, but oftentimes the shutters were probably drawn as well to keep a certain level of secrecy. And that was something that was sharply criticized by many people, talking about, decisions being made in the dark. But the writers of the Constitution were fearful that if things got out in drips and drabs, that it would slow the process down, that people would get bogged down in small details, and that they really wouldn't be able to put together a uniform plan and have people take it as a whole, and that they just kind of dissect the small pieces on a day-to-day basis. And you could almost see that. I mean, think of how we get bogged down in details today. Something comes out on Twitter, and people get all locked up in that, and you kind of lose sight, as the old saying goes, of the forest, because you're so involved in the trees. But that's the backside of it. You can imagine on a hot, sweaty Philadelphia day, I'm sure a lot of these members of the convention would have been happy to sneak out those back doors and stand on one of these back lawns under a shady tree. It must have been a difficult several months to be in that room with all these other sweaty guys in wool coats trying to determine what the Constitution was going to look like. We are at the front side of Independence Hall.
Oh, I'm just taking a picture of it.
Kind of intriguing. You see the old building, and right behind it, and the sky behind it. Nice artistic touch there. the old and the modern. And of course, if you can see, as this gentleman walks past us, you can see Washington's statue right in front there. And this whole complex is now part of the National Park System, as you can see, basically from block to block here, all the way down, all the way down that way. And if you do come to Philly on your own, without trying to make you seasick, we got the visitor center, and that'll tell you where all the things are that you want to see, including right across the grass there, the National Constitution Center.
All right, so what we see here with the Liberty Bell is that, why does it symbolize America? It symbolizes America in the sense of, again, not just the American Revolution and being used as a tool to summon Congress or state legislators to the Pennsylvania legislature when it first started, but what we see here is that it actually became a symbol for the expansion of civil rights, not only in the United States, but the world. So what we could think about here is that what the Liberty Bell symbolizes, is the Bingham painting. All right, it's a symbol of people getting their face into the county election, the expansion of civil rights for all groups. And we see here the shared goal. We see Lucretia Mott, we see Frederick Douglass, and the joint effort for women's rights in the 1830s and 1840s, as well as the abolition of slavery. And we see Frederick Douglass here with one of the most vocal leaders and most famous leaders of the abolitionist movement, who famously wrote "What Does 4th of July Mean to Me?" and showing about the hypocrisy of 4th of July, the contradiction of it, that it wasn't that all men were not created equal. But we see here that the bell itself is symbolizing that while America has gone through tough times in the past, that it's always tried to make itself and its inhabitants a better place. And here we see, folks, the bell itself. We see the infamous crack, which was actually a small crack when they unloaded it in Philly in the 1750s. They actually made the crack larger, and they hired Pass and Stowe to try to fix the crack so it wouldn't expand more on the bell. Of course, we had to show Philadelphia's most famous resident. No, not Rocky Balboa, but Benjamin Franklin. What you're going to see next is a group of photographs that we have taken from the Liberty Bell Center, that truly represents the meaning of the Liberty Bell and how this bell has been used in America's changing and evolving expansion of civil rights, as well as technological advancements. And what we see here is that the bell itself truly represents, as David McCullough would say, the American spirit. In addition, the song that will be playing with the montage is going to be John Philip Sousa's The Liberty Bell March, as indicated in one of the pictures. Okay, now our trip takes us back to the Museum of the American Revolution, and due to the amount of people that were in the museum, and just to be respectful of those around us, we did not do any filming. but I did take a bunch of stills, and you're going to have another montage of stills from inside the museum. The museum itself had on its special exhibit of flags and documents, and that was an exhibit that's going to go on through the fall, so that's where you're going to see most of these pictures of various important documents of the American Revolution, as well as different versions of the American flag, authentic American flags throughout our nation's history.
Hey guys, we're here at the American Revolutionary Museum, or the Museum of the American Revolution. Someday I'll get that name right. And somebody decided to put an essential question up on the wall for us. How revolutionary was the war? That's a question, of course, we're still asking ourselves. Question, how much changed as a result of the war and how much stayed the same?
All right, guys, here we go. Another essential question for us. So we see, what kind of nation did the Revolution create? So we're seeing now that, to quote the Hamilton soundtrack, winning was easy, governing is going to be harder. So we're going to see all these questions that this new formed nation is going to have to answer as the Revolutionary War ended. And what we're going to see in the biggest one, as I turn around here, there's Mr. O'Hagan, all right? We see here the unfinished victories. So we see all the problems that this nation is going to face. And I'm going to zoom in here on it and let you read it, but I'll also put the still in. We're definitely going to see this economic struggle that families now have acquired as a result of the American Revolution. And we see here the different perspectives. We see the corn planter. We see Phyllis Wheatley. Okay, was the Revolution a success for the African American poet Phyllis Wheatley? We see another perspective here of post-revolutionary America, Daniel Shays. All right, we're going to talk about him as we get into the Articles of Confederation and the impact that that's going to have on the Constitutional Convention. So, more to come. All right, so being New Jersey born, I had to share this with you folks. On the sacred soil of New Jersey. There we go. This is from Elizabeth Cady Stanton, talking about how New Jersey was one of the earliest now states, 1776 through 1807, to grant women the right to vote. So this is roughly, pick it, starting at 1800. This is 48 years prior to the Seneca Falls Convention, and well over a century till the 19th Amendment. So again, different faces, different perspectives of this war.
Okay guys, we're here with probably our last little stop in Philadelphia. Philly obviously is so tied to the nation's founding, and so much of their history is wrapped around that it makes sense that they would have a tomb for the unknown soldiers who died during the American Revolution. That's what the eternal flame, of course, always represents, and we see that in places like Arlington. But in this particular case, it's to commemorate the men who died during the Revolutionary War, from everything from wounds to sickness, and for those who couldn't be accounted for after the war was over and were assumed lost. And it's, I think, a stark reminder that this was a city that was so directly tied to the events of that time, whether it's the writing of the Declaration or the Constitution's writing, but the Revolution just permeates the whole city and the whole character of the city. And very unlike other places, as much as New York was vital to the American Revolution, when you walk through New York, you don't have that same connection. And that's a big part of it. Adding a little life into the into the video. A couple of kids running around. All right, guys, we'll see you soon.